Hey y'all, number one Nekros hater here. In my last video, I talked about how I think Nekros is one of the worst frames in the game, and a lot of people disagreed with me. And this is what I want. I want to understand how people get usage out of these bottom tier frames, because I think it's fun to take something that's bad and try as hard as you can to make it good. I've done this in the past. I think it's one of the most fun things you can do in Warframe. That being said, I would prefer thing good over thing bad, and that is what this new series is about. I'm going to talk about some bad Warframe kit and ability design and try to brainstorm some ideas to make them better. And I would love to hear what you think about the current state of said Warframe, as well as ideas that you have to make them better. The first episode in this series is going to be going over Nekros, talking about what he's designed to do, what he succeeds at, and what he struggles with, and try to come up with solutions to fix the flaws in their current kit. So let's dive into Nekros' kit and see what he can do. Starting with the passive, we can already see issues with his kit. Nekros' passive heals him and his companion for 5 health every time an enemy dies within 10 meters. Now this might sound pretty decent, but so many things make this passive irrelevant, including Nekros' own kit. Magus Elevate is the best operator arcane in the game, and it lets you heal by just pressing 5 over and over on any frame, and this outclasses so many healing abilities that heal in small increments, like this passive. This passive also does not proc Archon Intensify. But the main reason why I think this passive is really bad is because Desecrate provides better healing. You know, the ability that's used for more loot? Yeah, the more loot ability is a better healing ability than this, and it can also heal teammates as well. Nekros has one of the worst passives when you look at the entire kit of a Warframe, as his passive basically doesn't exist because his other abilities just do what his passive does better. When you compare this to other frames like Protea, Kullervo, Sevagoth, Garuda, and Wisp, it is clear that Nekros' passive is seriously lacking. Even frames with just mediocre passives have way more impact, such as Inaros or Caliban. I think this passive should just be reworked into something entirely different, but we'll get into that later. Nekros' first ability is Soul Punch, and this ability is basically useless. It does very little damage and knocks down a single target. Yeah, if the enemy you hit flies into other enemies, it will knock them down too, but they get up almost immediately. Any enemy that it would be worth to use this single target crowd control on is immune to it. Now, it does have a built-in execute, but this threshold is actually not the same as the Mercy execute threshold. It will execute a target if they are below 25% health, which might sound nice, but again, most things that this would matter against are immune to it. If it at least also executed anything that is open to a Mercy finisher, it would be better, but it just doesn't work like that. One nice thing is that if you kill an enemy with this ability, or they die 3 seconds after being hit by it, it will create a shadow of that enemy, or if you are at your max shadows, it will heal your shadows. This does sound nice, but it literally does nothing your 4th ability can't do. If it let you go above your standard cap of shadows, that would be something, but no, realistically all it does is heal your shadows, which you can already do by just pressing 4. The augment for this ability is Soul Survivor, which allows you to use Soul Punch on a downed ally to revive them at 30% health. This does sound nice, having Nekros be kind of a support, but in Warframe, this kind of support is just not needed. Good support in Warframe prevents dying in the first place, and Desecrate does a better job at that, providing your team with more health and energy orbs. Not to mention the fact that you can just press 5 and revive anyone with 0 risk while an operator. Even then, most people will either use Last Stand to revive themselves, or just to self-revive. I do like the idea for this augment, but Warframe is not a game where this type of support is valuable, especially because it takes up a mod slot. Nekros' second ability is Terrify. Terrify terrifies all nearby enemies, causing them to run away in fear while also reducing their armor for the duration of the ability. Terrify is most useful on other Warframes, as Terrify is Nekros' helmet ability. The problems with Terrify mostly come from the fact that Nekros doesn't really have the ability to capitalize on an armor strip like this the same way other frames can. Not only that, but this ability is expensive, coming in at 75 energy base. Compared to other AoE armor strips, it costs a lot of energy and makes enemies harder to kill by having them run away from you, and is also limited by a duration, meaning it doesn't work on Demolists, and it also doesn't work on bosses. That being said, this ability is still decent, but it only really shines when used on other frames. Terrify's augment is Creeping Terrify, and this augment makes it so enemies affected by Terrify are slowed by 60%. This might seem good, but all this really is a band-aid fix for the fact that Terrify makes the enemies you hit with harder to kill. This effect should just be base kit, and a new augment should be created instead. This effect is not worth the mod slot, as Nekros already usually uses 2 augments already. Nekros' third ability is Desecrate. Desecrate will consume corpses of defeated enemies, granting a 60% chance to spawn a health orb and an extra 54% chance to reroll the enemy's loot table, granting more loot. The exact specifics on the way that it gives more loot is a bit complicated. It basically just has a chance to roll the enemy's standard loot table again. This ability is the reason people pick Nekros. Nekros is the definitive extra loot frame. Korra and Hydrate might be better frames that also have a loot ability, but the extra loot from those abilities require an enemy to be hit by that specific ability, while Nekros just gives extra loot after the enemy died. There is nothing specific you need to do. Because of the way this works, pre-death loot effects such as Avara's Prowl, and on-death loot effects like Pilfering Swarm and Pilfering Strangledome will stack with Desecrate, as they are separate instances of extra loot. The only thing Desecrate does not stack with is the Chesakubro's Retrieve ability. This has only really become relevant now because dogs are actually good now, especially the Chesakubro. The Chesakubro has a budget Desecrate on any Warframe, and if people pick Nekros only for the extra loot, then you could achieve similar results with a Chesakubro on any frame, especially with the loot doubling mods on Beast Companions. Now, yes, if you are trying to farm a specific resource, Nekros is your best option, but outside of that, Nekros isn't that useful. Using a Chesakubro for just a little bit more loot is nice, especially because they'll give you more energy orbs, and that is really, really good. The extra health and energy orbs from Desecrate are nice, but other support frames have better energy and health regen sources, and most frames don't even need the extra help from these support abilities. For example, Nourish is a damage buff and a status application ability that just so happens to also give you an energy multiplier, which is what makes it one of the most popular helmets. Whisk gives way better health regen, as well as a max health buff, as well as a large movement speed buff, fire rate buff, and crowd control buff to every player. Trinity's 2 is still the easiest source of team energy regen, and she can press forward to heal the entire team to full, while also giving them a damage resistance. Unless you are specifically farming resources, there is no reason to specifically use Nekros. Desecrate's augment is Despoil. Despoil changes Desecrate to consume 10 health per corpse instead of 10 energy per corpse, and the health consumed is affected by ability efficiency the same way energy is. Most Nekros builds will suggest using this augment, but I disagree with it being a must-bring in every single build. While you do get health orbs from Desecrate to immediately heal the damage you take from this augment, if you use Equilibrium like you should be on Nekros, health orbs will also give you energy, meaning that you always have energy to keep Desecrate up. The self-damage from Despoil actually doesn't count as taking damage, meaning it won't turn off health conversion, but that also means it won't activate Arcane Avenger or Nourish's Explosion. DE, please change this. It would open up a lot more possible builds, and Nekros already gets so many health orbs that it doesn't matter that it turns off health conversion. Nekros' fourth ability is Shadows of the Dead. Activating this ability will create 7 shadow clones of the strongest enemy groups you have killed. The exact specifics of this are complicated, but basically it summons the strongest enemies you've killed recently. One thing to note is that it spawns them at their level when they died, and if you kill stronger, higher leveled enemies, you cannot replace your shadows with the stronger ones if they're still alive, meaning teammate healing abilities can actually screw you over by preventing you from summoning stronger shadows. These shadows are spawned with a 100% shield and health buff, and a 150% damage buff that scales with strength. Like most summons in Warframe, these guys aren't that great, and your guns are usually better at killing than your small army. Now, I have gotten comments telling me that this ability does scale good and does become strong at level cap. And this is a flawed argument because there is no reason to play at level cap. Now, I have nothing against endurance players, and I do like the challenge of creating a build and playing at level cap. I think it's fun, but my problem with level cap is how long it takes to get to it. I don't want to spend hours in a survival mission to get to level cap, especially because there is no reward or reason to. If they added something like Steel Path 2 Path Harder, where the enemies start at level 9999, and I wouldn't have to spend hours in a mission to reach level cap, and I could just start at it, then I would actually consider abilities that are only good at level cap to be better. The problem with abilities that scale like Shadows of the Dead and Grasp of Loke and Sonar is that there's no reason to be in a mission for more than like 30 minutes. The only game mode where endurance is remotely worth it outside of Fissures is Cascade, And that mode scales super fast compared to things like survival, so the only mode that makes it worth staying hours and hours in a single mission actually gets you to level cap fastest. Abilities like Shadows of the Dead that are only good if you meet a bunch of requirements, like staying in one mission for hours and hours, are fundamentally flawed. Again, I do like playing at level cap, I just don't want to spend hours and hours in a single mission to get to it. I would genuinely love a mode that just started at level cap to avoid the tedium of reaching it. And if you're one of the high-level endurance players that thinks that a mode like this would ruin the point and make it too accessible, then please get your unemployed ass out of here. Stop gatekeeping fun content because it would be more accessible. If they added a start at level cap mode, it would be basically pointless unless they added rewards for it, so it would just be an easier way to access the challenge mode. Anyways, Shadows of the Dead's augment is Shield of Shadows. This augment makes it so each shadow will take 6% of the damage you took, granting Nekros a better survivability. This augment is good, but it does create a fallacy. If Shadows of the Dead is only good at absurdly high level, then this augment is pointless because enemies will one-shot you at those high levels, even through all of the DR from Shield of Shadows and armor and health sources like Health Conversion and Arcane Blessing. This augment has been so core to Nekros' identity for years. I also think this augment should become base kit and just change the augment to be something entirely different and more interesting, like maybe having one super strong shadow that has like 10 to 15 times health and damage and is super aggressive. Nekros' kit is overall decent, but flawed. His abilities don't really have that much synergy, you just use the one ability he's picked for and some decent survivability to make sure you can use that one ability. His first ability is useless, his second ability sees better use on other frames like Volt and Ember. Desecrate is good, but most of its value comes from farming, not from the in-mission support it provides. Shadows of the Dead can be good, but it requires a lot of work to be worth it, not to mention the fact it confuses teammates and has poor team synergy with other frames. Nekros overall is fine, he's good enough if you really want to use him outside of farming. This is the build I run on him, using the classic Combat Discipline, Arcane Avenger, and Nourish combo. This is particularly good on Nekros because you can give the Nourish buff to all of your shadows, so whenever they get hit, they will do the Nourish explosion. Despoil still does not count as self-damage for triggering Avenger and Nourish, so we do have to run Combat Discipline. If you're not going to be running the Combat Discipline combo with these, change Arcane Avenger to Arcane Eruption because you'll be picking up so many orbs that that CC is really, really good. If Nekros could run a third Arcane, that's what would go on. Because Nekros makes so many health orbs, Arcane Blessing is really good on him. This extra health combined with Shield of Shadows gives us pretty decent survivability. The only thing on this build I would really maybe suggest changing is maybe drop Despoil and maybe change Precision Intensify. But because I don't really care about the damage buff from Nourish, I'm only really using the explosion part of it. Don't need that much strength, and Precision Intensify makes up for the fact that Overextended is gutting our strength. To buff our 4-up to have the shadows be stronger, and also for more damage reduction on Shield of Shadows because the damage reduction does scale with strength. Now I have two different suggestions for a Nekros rework. The first one consisting of mostly just smaller number changes, while the second one is a full-on rework with new mechanics. For the first, simpler rework, let's just change Nekros' passive to something entirely different. I think this passive should be changed to something that interacts with health orbs, something like health orbs partially reloading your gun, or health orbs can heal shields, something that interacts with the fact that Nekros is really, really good at making health orbs. Soul Punch is really hard to salvage, but at least make it so it can execute anything that's vulnerable to a Mercy finisher. It should also keep the enemy it hits knocked down for a second or two after you hit them with it, so it's easier to get a ground finisher on them. Terrify should just go down to 50 energy instead of 75. I think that other buffs to this ability might make it too good of a helmet, so like adding the slow from creeping Terrify to base kit might make it too good on helmet, so if you do that, make it so that part is not carried over into helmet. I also think you should be able to move while casting this ability, as the animation is just Nekros raising his arms. You could easily scare your enemies while running at them. Desecrate is perfectly fine as is, but Despoil should count as taking damage for the purpose of proccing things like Arcane Avenger and Nourish's Explosion. Shadows of the Dead should have Shield of Shadows base kits, and the augment should be something else. You also should be able to hold 4 to kill all your shadows to be able to spawn new ones whenever. These changes won't make Nekros that much better, but will still provide enough to make him feel a lot better to play. Now, the idea I have for a bigger Nekros rework that requires a lot more effort than just number changes is based on an idea for a new passive with new mechanics, and that would be giving Nekros a sort of soul collection in passive. Abilities would cause enemies to drop soul orbs or give souls directly. Whenever Nekros kills an enemy and they would drop a health orb, they will drop a soul orb instead. Soul orbs would count as health orbs, healing you the same way, and would proc anything that procs off of picking up a health orb. Whenever any player picks up a soul orb, it will heal the entire team and provide Nekros with a soul he can hold on to. Nekros can hold up to 15 souls, each soul providing him 25 armor. Whenever Nekros takes health damage, he loses a soul with a, say, 1 to 2 second grace period before you can lose another soul. Soul Punch would be changed from single target to AoE, being a cone similar to Sonic Boom or Condemn. Enemies affected by Soul Punch would have their souls ejected from their body, Doctor Strange style. Mechanically, this would be similar to the lifted state, like from Sentient Wrath, but the enemy's model turns into a transparent soul-like apparition of a single color, similar to Thrax enemies. While the enemy's soul is floating, there is also a transparent version of the enemy's normal model, either doing the sleeping animation or is knocked down, just to show that it's different from lifted. Enemies in this soul state have no shields or armor and will take extra damage scaling with strength and are extra vulnerable to void damage. Enemies killed in the soul state will instantly provide a soul pickup which will heal the team and give a health orb effect to everyone. You could also hold down the first ability to do a sort of soul grab, which acts kind of like a greedy pull, but can only pick up soul orbs and will also pull enemies that are in soul state together. Terrify would work similarly to how it does now, except it only costs 50 energy instead of 75. However, instead of making enemies run away, they will enter the soul state. Desecrate would work as is, but instead of giving a 60% chance for a health orb drop, it would give a 60% chance for a soul orb drop. Remember, picking up souls also counts as picking up a health orb, so this is just to be better. And again, make it so Despoil will trigger things like Arcane Avenger and Nourish's Explosion. Shadows of the Dead would consume all of your souls to buff your undead army. It works similarly to how it does now, except with the added ability to hold 4 to kill all your shadows to get new or higher level ones. Whenever you use your 4th ability for the first time, it will eat all of your soul orbs, and each soul orb consumed will give your summons bonus health, shield, armor, damage, and speed multiplier. When all of your shadows are already alive, using the 4 will consume a soul per shadow that is alive to heal them. This would encourage constantly using your other abilities to generate souls and spending them to keep yourself and your shadows alive. There could also be a mechanic where the more you feed your shadows souls, the stronger they get. It could say level them up or increase their damage and health even more. I really like this idea of a soul collection passive for Nekros, so let me know what you think about it or if you have suggestions for a similar theme. I do like Nekros conceptually, he just falls short of being a good frame in my books. If you think these ideas are dumb, then let me know in the comments. While you're down there, make sure to dislike this video to totally freaking own me for disagreeing with you. You better make sure you're also not subscribed either. I'll know. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know what frame you want me to talk about next on this series.